on them. Thank you for trying so hard to put them back into the computer straight. I know some of you told me that it was an issue with Microsoft, with Teams, that they were going crooked, that you guys would see it in straight. It's just that my neck was killing me looking at everything sideways, and I just, was trying to do yoga to mark your tests. I'm going to try making some videos this way because it's really hard for me to write on those little whiteboards, especially for today's lesson. Today's lesson's not hard at all. Okay, we're going to learn one more identity on that list of identity sheets that I gave for you. So we're going to be looking at what's called sum and difference formulas, and they could be found right here. Okay, so these three formulas right here, I actually wrote them out for you. So if you wanted to pause the video here, you can pause the video and copy them down. Let me explain them. It says the sign of, and now this is technically two different formulas. It's a plus formula and a minus formula, but I wrote them together. So when it says the sign of A plus B, it's sine A cosine B plus cosine A sine B. And when it's minus, it's sine cosine minus. This is different than the cosine formula. The cosine formula is when it's plus, notice it's minus. And when it's minus, notice it's plus. Okay, so cosine's always the odd man out. Okay, it's always opposite. And tangent, same thing. It's plus here, it's going to be plus, and then minus in the formula, and then minus, minus, minus. But again, you could just use this sheet, and whenever you need it, just look at the formulas, or you can use this formula sheet. They're called the sum and different formulas. They use a different symbol here. I used A and B. They use, well, it's Greek A and B. I don't know why they do that. Okay, so let me explain why we need these formulas. Okay, so the problem says find the sine of 15. And that's not a problem. It's not one of your quadrantal angles. It's not one of your angles on the unit circle. So you go to your calculator, you hit sine 15, you hit enter, and your calculator gives you this decimal that goes on forever. And wrong, because the directions are going to say find the exact value. Okay, well, you can't find the exact value. This is not an exact number. This is an approximation. This is bad. We are not going to use the calculators. Okay, so how am I going to find the sine of 15? It is not one of your quadrantal angles. It's not one of your unit circle angles. But it is a combination of the two. All right, and this is where a little thinking comes in. 15. I know that I have my 30, my 45, my 60 angle. I also have all the quadrantals, 0, 9, 180, 270. I can make 15 by taking 45 and subtracting 30. So I could rewrite this as the sine of 45 minus 30. Okay, that being the case, then I can use, I'm going to leave this like that. Can you see it? Well, almost. Then I can use, if it's 45 minus 30, I can use the sine of A minus B. So this is going to be, let me move this up here. All right, you can't see both. Let me just squeeze it out a little bit like that. It's going to be the sine of, this is my A, 45, times the cosine, this is my B. This is considered your A angle. This is your B angle. Cosine of 30. It's minus, with sine it's always the same, minus. Then we flip it. The cosine of the A angle, which in this case is 45, times the sine of the B angle, which in this case is 30. Now, I simply simplify. I know the sine of 45 is radical 2 over 2. I know the cosine of 30 is radical 3 over 2 minus cosine of 45, radical 2 over 2, Sine of 30 is 1/2. Notice how everybody has the same denominator. So I have radical 2 times radical 3. This is radical 6 over 2 minus radical 2 times 1 is radical 2 over 2. You cannot combine these. The radicals are not the same. Okay, however, they have the same denominator, so we can write it as one radical. Not one radical, one fraction, sorry. Radical 6 minus radical 2 over 2. And that's the answer. Okay, that's the exact value. Now let's go back to the calculator for a second. As you can see, I have this 0.2588. I'm going to plug this into the calculator. I'm going to plug second square root of 6, move out of there, minus second square root of 2, move out of there. You know I'm old-fashioned, I can't do it all together, so I'll hit enter, and then I'll divide that by 2, and it didn't come out to be the same one, and I do not know why. So I will have to figure that out, because it's supposed to come out to be the same one. Is 45 minus 30 15? Yes. Did I do something wrong here? 6 times 3, 2, 1. I have to check my modes. Give me a second. I'm going to pause this while I check my modes. Okay, I checked my modes. My mode wasn't wrong. What was wrong is that I have not had a sip of coffee yet. What's 2 times 2? It's 4. What's wrong with me? This is 4. This is 4. This is 4. That's why. This is what happens when you try doing math without coffee. And when I put it back in the calculator and I divided it by 4, it worked. Okay, so yes, 2 times 2 is 4. All right, let me take another sip of coffee. We know I don't work without caffeine. All right, guys. Not that hard. The hardest thing is going to be you're going to have to make a 15 out of the values. You have to be careful. It's not just these values. You can make it with any of the values. Okay? You could take 240 and subtract it from 135. Okay? And use it to find an angle that makes. You can take 315, okay, over here and subtract it from 60. All right? So there's a lot of different ways you can do this. So for example, I'm going to try another one like this, and then I'm going to show it to you in reading measure. All right, number 2. Cosine of 75. Okay? And again, we can make cosine using the 30 and the 45. So this can be the cosine of 30 plus 45. Okay, now with addition, obviously it doesn't matter which way this goes. With subtraction, it's going to matter. Okay, but this gives you 75. You're going to take your formula for the cosine. Remember, this is your A angle, this is your B angle. It's going to be the cosine of 30, cosine 45, minus, the formula's opposite with cosine, then it's sine 30, sine 45. Okay, cosine of 30 is radical 3 over 2 times radical 2 over 2 minus 1/2 times radical 2 over 2. This is going to be radical 6 over 4. See, I remembered the 4. I took another sip of coffee. Minus radical 2 over 4. And that's going to be, as a single fraction, radical 6 minus radical 2 over 4. And this is how you leave your answer, guys. Okay, look at that. The sine of 15 is the same as the cosine of 75 because they're complementary angles. Okay, so I want to show you another problem because we don't just have angles in degrees, we have angles in radians. Tangent of 7 pi over 12. Okay, so this is not an angle on the unit circle. All right, I know that we do have 12s, but it's not this because you can't reduce it. Remember, radian measure is either 3, 6, 4, or 2 in the denominator. This would only work as a 12 in the denominator if I could reduce it and get it back to 6. You can't. You can't reduce this fraction. So here's where I'm going to tell you to cheat. I am going to tell you to simply change this into degree. Okay? At this point, just going to tell you change this into degree. When you change this into degree, it actually is a 105-degree angle. Just for those of you who need a refresher on how to change it into degree. 7 pi over 12 times 180 over pi. Okay, the pi's will cancel out. These are both divisible by, 6, so let's try 2. And this is 30. Oh, I guess it's divisible by 12. This is 1 and this is 15. And then 15 times 7 is 105. So you can just change it into degree measurement, and then you would have to do tan of 105. Let's see. What two angles can I add to give me 105? Well, I definitely can do 60 plus 45. So it would be the tangent of 60 plus 45. And then I will follow the tangent formula, which is this is your A angle, this is your B angle, and I would work the whole thing out. All right, I'm not going to work it all out because I don't want this video to get too long because it's just one other thing I want to show you. Sometimes they want you to simplify, okay? And in simplifying, let me get my problem that I thought I wrote down. They might give it to you like this and say, rewrite as a single expression. Okay, and it will give you tangent of 32 plus tangent of 13 over 1 minus tangent 32 tangent 13. Again, look at these angles, 32 and 13. We don't know the values of that. I can't tell you the tangent of 13 without using a calculator. So what I'm going to do, it's almost as this was expanded. I'm going to bring it back. If I look at my formulas, okay, if I take my formula out here, it's a plus. So since this is a plus, that meant it probably gets put together by adding. So I'm going to add these two together. This really simplifies to the tangent of 32 plus 13, which is the tangent of, what is that, 45? And what is the tangent of 45? The tangent of 45 is 1. Okay, so see how that works? Sometimes they're going to give it to you in the formula. You're going to bring it back together, whether it's adding or subtracting, and it will be one of the angles that's going to be on the unit circle. Again, the hardest thing about this, guys, is trying to figure out what angle you're going to make. So let me just show you one other one. For example, if I ask you for the sine of 195, okay? It's not a unit circle angle. It's not a quadrantal angle. You have to look all around the unit circle to figure out what two angles can equal this. And I can make it by 135 plus 60. These are both angles on the unit circle. So it would be sine of 135 cosine 60 plus cosine 135 sine 60. Okay, the cosine of 45, the cosine of 135, it's a 45-degree reference angle. So it's going to be the square root of radical 2 over 2. This is what you have to be careful with. Okay, this lives in quadrant 2, 135. Sine is positive. This is fine. Okay, but when I write the cosine of 135, it's going to be negative because 135 is in quadrant 2, and quadrant 2 only sine is positive. So this would be positive, but this one would be negative. And then the cosine of 60 is 1/2. The sine of 60 radical 3 over 2. Now I just do the math. Again, remembering to have coffee and multiply the denominator. That won't happen again to us. Now here, this becomes negative radical 6 over 4. So now your final answer is radical 2 minus radical 6.